You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
I'm joined now by Alan Doolan from Twoheads Design Advertising. Good morning, Alan. You might start by telling me about your own background, please.
Well, I'm originally from Dublin. I'm living in Wexford now 10 years. My background has always been in advertising and marketing. Unlike most kids during summer holidays when they were teenagers, I never had summer holidays. I was dragged into an advertising agency in Dublin, in Leeson Street, for the 2-3 months of a year every summer. And did that for maybe the 5 years of secondary school. Started doing very basic tasks like just runs and coffee making and so on, but quickly got sucked into the studio, the graphics studio. And as I gained more experience, the demands got bigger, and then everyone within the business was fighting for my time, because I was the guy about house, could pretty much do all the general tasks. Gave me a great insight into all aspects of advertising, from design right through to media, marketing, booking and so on. So by the time it came time to leave school, pretty much all I knew at that point was advertising, and I got a job in Dublin. After that, I moved completely out of advertising and moved on to Microsoft Ireland, and ended up spending 11 years there. The first 5 years were spent in print and package design, and then the following 6 years were in project management of their online space, so Office Online International. At the end of the 11 years, I started to think about opening my own business, combining what I'd learned and what I knew from the advertising and from the project management, and seeing what services I could offer and seeing what business was out there. I set up Twoheads Design Advertising in Enniscorthy in Bree, and pretty much have not looked back since.
With that combination of advertising, marketing and project management, what do you see as key considerations for businesses when they're setting about advertising?
I suppose one of the big things I've learned in all the years in the advertising agencies was there is an incredible amount of guff involved. It's quite a fickle business, and there's a lot of common sense, and by that I mean all about creating an impression, not a whole lot more than creating an impression. We're all customers, that's the good news. So we're all pretty much experts in what we like and don't like. So we shouldn't forget that. You should trust yourself and your instincts. You might be a business owner. When it comes to looking at your own advertising, sometimes common sense goes out the window. But we actually have a fair understanding ourselves being customers. Having a strong, cohesive brand identity is incredibly important to your customer.
What does that mean?
Okay, so think of it as necessary evil. If it's absent, it will be noticed by your customer. Imagine the big franchises around where all aspects of marketing and advertising are considered. Be it down to the little poster on the window. Everything's branded perfectly. There's nothing broken, nothing out of place. You don't necessarily think you're going to get a better product or service from these guys, but it implies that there's a fairly solid foundation behind the business, as opposed to a competitor who may occasionally stick fluorescent pink post-it notes up on their window. It just lessens the impact of the brand and the image. When the image is built up and is strong, it's important to avoid the danger of breaking the image by doing things like I've just said, where you use a non-branded bag for a business that's fairly consistent on brand image.
I know, Alan, that to lots of small business owners, branding is something that they just think they can't afford. What are your thoughts on that?
I can understand where the confusion might lie, but I wouldn't agree. I think it's all about having a plan. And if all you're going to be doing for the next year is using your logo in various places, you're only talking about a logo at that point. You make sure that that logo is protected, it's not broken up, it's not handed out to third parties who use it as they see fit. You protect your brand, you protect your logo. That's just a logo on its own. As your business grows, as your advertising budget grows, you can start to expand your brand to appear on other elements. What
can a business owner do to identify the best advertising channels for their business?
It's important to take a step back and determine what type of business you have. Are you a B2B or a B2C type business? The list is endless. Do you have a common product in a competitive market, or do you have a unique product with no competition, or do you have a unique product with no competition but it's so unique no one knows about it? The answer to all those is going to determine a very different advertising strategy and how you should proceed. You have lots of avenues open to you, such as, of course, radio, newspaper, magazines, directories like Golden Pages and so on, leaflets, flyers and brochures and direct mail, posters, point of sale and signage, livery, and what's become quite popular is mobile advertising. Of course, you have online then, you have websites, mailing lists, newsletters, Google AdWords campaigns. The list really is endless. The trick is to determine what type of business you are, Start to draw up a list, prioritise the list, and say to yourself, right, now is the time to start going down this list and trying things. By all means, test the water.
So let's say, for instance, a business owner identifies what their market is and where they're going to find them in their greatest numbers. With a plan in place, what strategy should be adopted?
You're going to hear me say the word measure a few times here, because measurement is key. I said, by all means, test the water. If you're going to do door-to-door leaflet drops, you need to measure the return. You need to put something on the leaflet that gives you a way to evaluate and measure how many returns came back.
Give me an example of how that could be done.
Okay, so for a client, Fiat in particular, who wanted to advertise their garage, we devised a way where the customer was able to come in and get a free vacuum and valet. So of 1,000 leaflets dropped, if you get 30 back in, you know, that's worked or hasn't worked if your expectations were higher. And you can say next time you're considering such an opportunity, you can say, well, it's going to cost me X amount to do 1,000 leaflets. Is it worth the return? It has to be measured. It's so basic. Run an advert, the phone rings. It's incredible. The majority of businesses that we would ask don't have a strict measurement plan in place. Quite often with small and medium-sized organisations, it might be the business owner answering the phone. They're caught unaware. They respond, they get into conversation about prices and products. They forget to ask the most fundamental question: how did you hear about us? If you don't ask the question, you don't know. Any money you spend whatsoever in advertising, you may as well open the window and throw it out, because you have absolutely no idea what's working and what isn't working. So you have to measure.
What's the reason why business owners aren't measuring the response they're getting from advertising, in your opinion?
Again, it's lack of planning in advance. There's been no strategy put in place, let's say, for the year ahead to say, okay, on X month we're going to run some leaflet drops. The following month we're going to run a press ad. So a lot of the time, somebody will run an ad on the radio. They'll get phone calls. They won't ask the most obvious question: how did you hear about us? So an example being a company we've been working with recently who ran an advertising campaign across several newspapers. They had some radio too. Not all the staff were notified that this was actually a planned strategy, and so there were several missed opportunities when customers did follow on from the radio adverts they'd heard. No one was ever asked how had they heard about the company. So money was spent. There had been a strategy in place, but through lack of poor communication and a cohesive strategy within the company, there was a lost opportunity to measure exactly the return for that investment.
Alan, you've mentioned the word planning a number of times so far during this interview. Let's say, for instance, the average business out there today spending 5,000 to 10,000 euros per year on advertising. How best could they plan in advance to spend that to get their best bang for their buck?
If you're going to spend that type of money, you need to sit down and say, right, looking at the year ahead, what avenues are open to us based on the type of business that we just discussed? What type of business are we? There's lots of information out there that if you don't ask, you won't know. An example being press, newspapers, magazines and radio too have event calendars for the year ahead. If you don't ask the question, you won't know, but there will be events coming up throughout the year. There'll be features and supplements, editorials and other special features. You know, they'll be appearing in the newspaper throughout the year, and if you ring up, you'll be told what these are, and so you can plan accordingly and say in 3 months' time, I know there's a special on education, or whatever the case may be. So rather than waiting in reaction mode, which a lot of businesses do, be proactive. And search those avenues. So I mentioned reaction mode. It's quite common, and a common story we hear from a lot of our customers where they'll receive prospective phone calls from maybe a press or radio station who are offering last minute deals and good deals, and they seem very attractive. But because they're in reaction mode, they'll agree, and by the end of the year, maybe half a dozen times they've done this. It hasn't been planned, they haven't measured, and they've spent a substantial amount of money, but with nothing to show for it. They've lost their faith in their advertising strategy, in advertising in general, and are left pretty deflated. And often we have to pick up the pieces. So, a business owner really has to determine who their customer is, what demographic they fall into. Are we talking male, female, both? What age bracket, what demographic? Where are they located? What are they doing? Are they listening to the radio? Are they reading newspapers? Are they reading magazines? Are they watching TV? Determining who your customer is and where they are is vital. Based on that, to get their best bang for their buck, they need to work out their cost per 1,000. And what I mean by cost per 1,000 is there's lots of information out there. You have ABC figures, you have the media stats from the different publications and so on. They'll tell you what the rate is per column inch. So you can say, okay, a quarter page is going to cost me €500. The circulation or distribution for that newspaper is 15,000. You want to divide your 500 by the 15,000 to get your cost per thousand, and you do that across the board with all your different advertising streams and figure out what's your best bang for the buck.
Alan, as you know, one of the largest national events of the year is coming to Wexford in a number of weeks' time, the National Ploughing Championships. What advice would you give to any Wexford-based businesses that were lucky enough to get a stand at the National Ploughing Championship taking place in a number of weeks?
I suppose first off, it is important to recognise the magnitude of that show. We have first-hand experience last year and this year in planning this year, but last year of a local substantial company last year that took a stand. It's not to be dismissed the fact that for a lot of particularly rural families and farming background families, it may be the only opportunity in the whole calendar year where the husband and wife get together, go out and make serious purchasing decisions, be it a new kitchen, stove, whatever the case may be. Those decisions may not be made again for another year. And the Ploughing Championship is one of those shows where those decisions are made. Kids are taken off school. It's a big, big event. Having a stand, I think, is a major coup for anyone, and I think anyone in business in Wexford really should have a stand at the Ploughing Championships. And my advice to anyone who's been successful enough to actually take a stand at this year's show would be to give some consideration to thinking outside the box. How can they engage the customer before they actually even enter the marquee? There's going to be a lot of competition down there, a lot of marquees. Some marquees may not see a huge footfall. So what can you do? Is your product or service conducive to being able to display it outside the marquee, for example? When you consider how you might display your product or service, try to think less is more. Think of creative ways. Can your product be displayed outside and engage the customer? Once inside then, how are you going to use the space? Generally, it's a case of we need a poster, we need another poster, another poster. And before you know where you are, you have this mishmash collage on the wall. Very little consideration. It does come back to planning once again. Draw out your stand. If you're not enlisting professional expertise advice, draw out your stand. Consider how a customer is going to walk into the marquee. Consider the space. On paper, when you get your marquee plan, 9 by 3 metres, 2 by 6 metres can be very different. Mark it out, do it on your kitchen floor, in your back garden, whatever it is. Get a realistic impression for what size space you have and imagine your products displayed in there, leaving enough room for the public to walk around. Look at ways of engaging your customer. Maybe it's going to be a takeaway or a giveaway to the kids. Maybe it's going to be engaging the adults in some sort of competition or some way they leave their details. Gives you the opportunity to build up a customer database. Maybe you want to supplement your stand with some small products that you can sell on the day as cash sales to help offset the cost of the stand, but you do need to consider engaging your customer and building up a database of names.
That's some very good advice, Alan. Most of what we've talked about already on the interview has been traditional advertising and how people can best plan and measure the effects of that. Let's look at the online space for a second. How does it differ?
Okay, accessibility is obviously a huge difference with so many mobile devices, but leaving that aside, I'd like to stress business owners shouldn't treat it so differently. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes a lot of business owners make is seeing the website as a means to an end. You often get a request, we need a website. The website's done, delivered, and that's pretty much it. It may as well go on a shelf. It's a dynamic advertising tool. It needs to be considered as such. It requires ongoing consideration, ongoing maintenance. I'd suggest simplify things. See your website as a magazine ad. So just because your website is found, there's no guarantee you're going to garner business from it. Similarly, if you have a magazine ad, there's nothing to say the customer is going to buy from you without turning the page and buying from a competitor. Similarly, there's nothing stopping them from hitting the back button and going to the next page. If it's not visually engaging and then content engaging, being on page one is something of a farce in a way. You need all the boxes ticked. But don't always see it as something so different. See it as conventional advertising on a different medium. You
touched on a very valid point there about websites needing to be kept fresh and updated and everything else. But I think one of the main issues out there in relation to that is traditionally website designers have created sites in HTML format, and it's only in more recent times that content management systems have been used, which gives the website owner, the business owner, the control to be able to update it themselves. What advice in that respect would you give to business owners that have websites that are still in that traditional HTML format that they can't actually update themselves?
Yeah, unfortunately it's a huge stumbling block, and there is a lot of legacy content out there in a format that doesn't allow the customer to update it. And even content management systems don't always allow ease of updates. really you need to consider, is your website something that you see as a strong arm of your business and you want to move it forward? If you do, I'm afraid a content management system really is the way forward. Ask to see examples and see a demonstration of the content management system in advance, in operation, because a web developer, a web designer may describe something as simple, but there's different levels of complexity and different skill sets out there. You'd be amazed at how the simplest of tasks are shunned by the customer at the end of the day. And even if they pay for a content management system, which is relatively easy to use, a lot of them, again, find it too complicated. Ask to see a demo and take full control of your website as much as possible. It's like anything else. The only way you're ever going to learn is when you have to do it. And you'll find after a while the tasks become repetitive. And you'll only be doing, a handful of tasks over and over again. They'll become easy. You won't be afraid of your website and you'll take more control over your own business.
Social networking has been described as the silver bullet to solving all the advertising problems for any business owner. What are your views on this?
3 words, I think. It can be. Handled with care. Absolutely huge potential. However, the biggest misconception, misunderstanding most business owners have is they fail to understand it requires a serious amount of effort. Quite frequently you're asked, we need to have Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and all the others added to a website. You ask the question and say, okay, well, who would you like to administer those features on your website, and who's going to drive them, and who's going to live in Twitter, and who's going to live on Facebook, keeping your customers up to date? And you're met with a blank look. So the potential is there, but it takes a fair amount of commitment. And businesses really need to consider committing somebody or part of someone's time, committing a resource to managing these fantastically opportunistic avenues, but they need to consider it's going to take manpower and it's going to take hours. And the return for the investment can be very slow. Often you see the pitfalls where the business owner gets more interested in the fact that a competitor has 1,000 likes and they've only 500. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, but we're all human and we get taken in by these fickle things. But you do have to consider how much time are you going to devote to these, and they can pay dividends, but consider you're going to have to put lots of time in.
Apart from time, what other skills are required in order to utilise these to their maximum potential?
Anyone managing a Twitter, Facebook, YouTube account on behalf of a business needs to live in those worlds. They need to see what the competitor's doing, how frequently they're doing it, what other similar markets are doing, what trends are happening on the internet, and build up a full picture of where they can see niches where they can slide their business into a conversation somewhere else, into another social network, into another conversation. Unless you live in that space, and I mean virtually live in that space, you're fighting a losing battle, I believe.
What do you see to be the big changes that are coming down the track in relation to advertising and marketing over the next few years in Ireland?
I think personalised, targeted advertising is going to become the future. Anyone who's seen Minority Report or Tom Cruise walks into a boutique and suddenly it's him on a screen wearing the latest designer gear. Google has done an incredible job of determining information about your browsing habits, and you may look for a product one day and 3 days later find that you're being presented with more offerings and cheaper products based on what you did. I think that's the way it's going to be. I think more and more.
Well, Alan, it's certainly been a very insightful interview. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for dropping by this morning and wish you continued success with Twoheads Design and Advertising.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.